From Vermont Public, this is The Frequency. I'm Mitch Wertlieb. It's Friday, June 20th, and here are today's headlines. Senator Peter Welch says he opposes a provision of a big budget bill being considered by Congress that restricts states' abilities to regulate artificial intelligence. Welch says this part of the bill is not receiving very much attention, but it could have an enormous impact on the use of AI in the future.
It gives the AI folks free rein to do whatever it is they want without any scrutiny from any state. That is totally in conflict with state rights concerns that I certainly have.
Welch says the ban could have a direct impact on Vermont. State lawmakers this session considered a bill to require the disclosure of the use of artificial intelligence in some political ads. Welch says that proposal would not be allowed if the federal budget plan passes. Electric aircraft manufacturer Beta Technologies has secured a major new partnership. Republic Airways has agreed to take delivery of one of the South Burlington Company's all-electric ALIA planes. The airline plans to evaluate ALIA for use in regional passenger and cargo flights. Republic Airways operates regional service for several major carriers, including American, United, and Delta Airlines. News of the deal comes just days after Beta became the first U.S. company to land an all-electric aircraft at a New York City airport. And ALIA recently became the first electric aircraft to fly at the famed Paris Air Show. The number of Quebec homes located in flood zones will likely increase by 30% when new maps are introduced next year. That's according to the CBC. Flood maps in the province are several decades old. The government has said new rules are necessary due to climate change. They were pursued after major flooding in 2017 and 2019 caused more than $1 billion in damages. Some mayors, though, have expressed concerns that the new maps will cause home values in new flood zones to plummet. They also worry the maps could prevent some residents from purchasing flood insurance, the CBC reports. Quebec officials say no one will be forced to relocate their homes, but new construction will be banned in high-risk zones and homes destroyed there will not be rebuilt. Vershire author Matthew Hongoltz-Hetling has a new book out, and in it he tells the story of a research center in New Hampshire that's trying to find scientific evidence of paranormal activity. Hongoltz-Hetling uses the story as a launching pad to explore the ties between pseudoscience and the public's eroding trust in institutions like government and media. He discussed the book, which is called The Ghost Lab, on Vermont Edition.
Right now, as we're all sort of looking out at the political landscape, we're seeing a lot of impacts of national distrust in our institutions. And in New Hampshire, they've sort of been through this on a smaller scale a little bit earlier than the rest of the country.
Hongoltz-Hetling is a former Valley News reporter and the author of 2 other nonfiction books. Coming up, a group called the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition was unsuccessful in its attempts to persuade Governor Scott to veto a new bill affecting the state's cannabis industry. Vermont Public's Bob Kinzel explains their objections after this.
Thanks for listening to The Frequency, where support comes from VITA, supporting business growth and innovation in the Green Mountain State. From agriculture to manufacturing, energy to food production, find solutions that turn your business dreams into reality. Visit VEDA.org and see how VITA can help make it happen.
Last week, Governor Phil Scott signed legislation that affects Vermont's retail cannabis industry. But the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition urged the governor to veto the bill because it says the proposal does not include any of its top priorities. The coalition fears the failure to address those issues will result in a sizable number of small growers going out of business and encourage those cultivators to return to the illicit market to sell their products. Vermont Public's Bob Kinzel has been following the story, and he spoke about it with host Jen Jarecki.
Okay, Bob. So what is in this bill that the governor recently signed?
Jen, when the House passed this legislation, it was largely a housekeeping and administrative bill. But then the Senate added a pilot project to it. And this plan would have allowed small growers to sell their products at an off-site location, kind of like a farmer's market setting. It would be done under the auspices of a licensed retailer, and there could be up to 5 of these events in the next year overseen by the Cannabis Control Board. But the House rejected this approach. Chittenden Representative Jim Harrison led the fight against it. He said it needed much, much more study, and he had strong concerns that it would, quote, promote cannabis use.
We're still new at this, so I'm sure over time we'll find other ways, but I'm uncomfortable with promoting it in these so-called farmers markets.
Harrison says he's willing to revisit this issue next year, but with no guarantees that he'll support it.
Who are the members of the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition, and what are some of their key issues?
Jen, the coalition is made up of 5 groups: the Vermont Growers Association, Rural Vermont, the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance, the Green Mountain Patients Alliance, and the Northeast Organic Farming Association. Jen, they had a number of key priorities, and number 1, allow growers to sell directly to consumers at their farms, not the pilot program approach. 2, allow public use of cannabis anywhere that tobacco use is permitted. 3, dedicate money to the state's Social Equity Business Development Fund. And 4, expand the state's medical cannabis program. Now, the direct sale to consumers issue is huge for them because there's a limited amount of shelf space at the state's 110 retail stores. And that's the only place their products can be sold legally. And they also argue that direct sales would make cannabis available in regions of the state that currently don't have any retail stores.
What did they say would happen if this provision was not included in the bill?
Well, Jen, they argued that without this provision, a lot of small growers will have a very tough time staying in business, and we're actually starting to see this happen. Roughly 1/3 of the so-called Tier 1 outdoor growers have already relinquished their licenses this year. They've dropped out of the legal market. Now, these are very small cultivators with a growing space of less than 1,000 square feet, or about the size of a 2-car garage. Jeffrey Pizzatillo is the head of the Vermont Growers Association, and he says some of these small growers will now return to the illicit or legacy market to sell their products, and he says that's not a good development.
It is sort of like a feedback loop where you actually end up sort of fueling the legacy market, which then at a certain point materially begins to compete with the regulated market. It is something that we're aware of, and we would like to stop that.
And Jen, this issue is further highlighted because the Cannabis Control Board has put a freeze on all new retail licenses until it has a chance to make new rules to encourage more geographic diversity of stores around the state.
What's the viewpoint of the Cannabis Control Board on these issues raised by the coalition?
Jen, James Pepper is the chairman of the board. He says he's sympathetic to their concerns, and he supported the pilot farmers market plan. But he also says there's a political reality at the State House that everyone needs to recognize.
Not everyone really is supportive of expanding the market or kind of changing the fundamental compromise that led to their support of the original cannabis, legislation, Act 164.
And Jen, Pepper thinks there's an underlying issue that affects the entire debate over cannabis issues at the State House, and that is there's still a stigma about cannabis use that does not exist for alcohol use. For instance, he points out that lawmakers this session renewed a law that was originally passed during the COVID pandemic. That bill allows customers to purchase, quote, pre-made cocktails to go from a bar or restaurant when they place a takeout order for food. And at the same time, he points out, there's a group of lawmakers who wouldn't support the pilot farmers market cannabis plan.
So, Bob, what happens now?
Jen, I think the coalition will monitor how many more small growers go out of business in the next 6 months, and then come back to the legislature next January with another package of priorities. But given the political realities at the State House that Chairman Pepper described, winning approval for that pilot farmers market plan might be their best hope, and that's something that right now they are not very enthusiastic about.
You've been hearing from Vermont Public's Bob Kinzel. Bob, many thanks for this update.
My pleasure, Jen.
And now it's time for our weekly check-in on news from the world of sports. And my prediction that the Florida Panthers would take the Stanley Cup final in 6 games from the Edmonton Oilers came true. Not a tough call to make, really, but I rarely get these right, so thanks for letting me crow about it a bit. The Panthers' 5-1 victory Tuesday secured their 2nd consecutive championship against the same team they beat last year. The trade deadline addition of former Boston Bruins captain and future Hall of Famer Brad Marchand gave Florida an extra attacking edge, and the Oilers really missed Zach Hyman, who was unavailable after being injured in the semifinal against Dallas. But even if they'd had Hyman on the ice, the Oilers were destined to lose this series. In addition to their smothering defensive play and relentless forechecking, the Panthers got much better goaltending from Sergei Bobrovsky than the Oilers did from either Stuart Skinner or Calvin Pickard. Sam Bennett received the Conn Smythe Trophy as the most valuable player in the postseason, scoring a league-high 15 goals through the 4 rounds. Truth is, though, you could also have made an argument for Sam Reinhart, who scored 4 goals in Game 6 to seal it, the aforementioned Marchand, who almost single-handedly won the pivotal Game 5 with a 2-goal outburst, plus his double overtime winner in Game 2, or Bobrovsky for his brilliance in net. That's how deep and stacked the Panthers were this year. And I may be 2 for 2 in predictions after the Oklahoma City Thunder took on the Indiana Pacers in Game 6 of the NBA Finals Thursday night. I called OKC in 6 as well, and even though the Pacers were at home, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander could practically taste the championship. I'm guessing that he led the former Seattle Supersonics to their first title in the Sooner State without having to go back there for a Game 7. If the Pacers were able to force a Game 7, it'll be Sunday night in Oklahoma City. Okay. On to the news that blew up text group chats all across Red Sox Nation last Sunday. The trade of Rafael Devers, Boston's premier power hitter and 3-time All-Star, to the San Francisco Giants for a pair of pitchers and 2 prospects. Talk about predictions. You'd have to be a baseball Nostradamus to have seen this one coming, at least this far in advance of the July 31st trade deadline. So why would the Red Sox deal away a player of Devers' caliber? Well, when Boston acquired Alex Bregman this past offseason, they wanted him to play third base. Kind of makes sense. He won a Gold Glove at that position just last year and is better defensively at the hot corner than Devers is. But Devers was not happy about being asked to yield the bag to Bregman and take over duties as designated hitter instead. His disgruntlement only grew when the Red Sox lost their starting first baseman to a season-ending injury and then asked Devers if he would consider learning that position. The short answer was no, and other players, Abraham Toro being the most successful to date, were rotated in to play first instead. This sort of thing is not uncommon in baseball, and while some fans view Devers' attitude as being team unfriendly, it's also true that the Red Sox front office did not communicate especially well with Devers, and there is plenty of blame to go around regarding how the whole thing was handled. But fans are still angry, and rightfully so, about what happened 5 years ago when the team traded away Mookie Betts to the LA Dodgers, essentially because they didn't want to have to shell out big bucks for a new contract once Betts hit free agency. So they let one of the best players in a generation leave town in a penny-pinching move that really made no sense, since they ended up dishing out a huge $300 million contract to keep Devers in response to the fan backlash. In soccer, that's called an own goal, and it's an apt analogy here, since team owner John Henry also owns a Liverpool soccer club and often seems more interested in its fortunes than those of the Red Sox. And look, I'm not necessarily against trading Devers. What I object to is the paltry return they got for a player who's in the league's top 5 for runs batted in. Lefty Kyle Harrison's earned run average is an uninspiring 4.5, and righty Jordan Hicks comes to town with an ERA above 6. There is some potential upside with the prospects thrown into the deal, but I'm tired of hearing about prospects. Practically the whole Red Sox squad is made up of them at this point. If the Red Sox were intent on dealing Devers, they should have shopped him around for better arms that can help the team now. Instead, they took the first offer they got for one very obvious reason. The Giants were the first team to say they would absorb the whole of Devers' contract, taking Boston off the hook for some $250 million over the next 8 years. And in defending the move, Red Sox ownership says they'll aggressively use those savings to spend on high-quality players that can help them get back to the playoffs for the first time in 4 years and compete for a championship. And that's the standard they must adhere to, even if, and this is critical, even if Boston's recent run of success, which included a sweep of the first-place New York Yankees and a 6-game winning streak that was halted Tuesday night in an 8-0 loss to Seattle, peters out by the trade deadline. The Yankees, by the way, have been on quite the slide. As of Wednesday, they'd lost 5 in a row, 7 of their last 10, and they've been shut out in 3 consecutive games. But don't waste any time worrying about the Bronx Bombers. They'll be just fine. Back to the Red Sox. Their current record is good enough for a potential wild card playoff berth. But if that changes and the Sox start selling off players while saying it's for the future good of the team, that would be inexcusable. The future for the Red Sox has been sitting on its hands for 4 years now. They are not the Pirates, Rays, or A's, and they shouldn't be run that way. If the team uses the money to really improve the squad and make them playoff contenders, Fans should be okay with Rafi hitting home runs into McCovey Cove instead of over the Green Monster. If not, it would be perfectly understandable if there were far fewer voices belting out Sweet Caroline during the 8th innings at Fenway Park. And that's our weekly look at news from the world of sports. Thanks for listening to The Frequency today. We had additional reporting from Bob Kinzel, Mark Davis, and Michaela Lafrac. Today's episode was edited by Mark Davis, and our music is by Blue Dot Sessions. I'm Mitch Wertlieb. I'll talk to you Monday.
Planet Money helps you understand the economy. We find the people at the center of the story.
Garbage in New York, that was like a controlled substance.
We show you how money influences everything.
Tell me what you like by telling me how you spend your money.
And we dig until we get answers.
I had a bad feeling you were going to bring that up.
Planet Money finds out. All you have to do is listen. The Planet Money Podcast from NPR.